What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here to discuss some Detroit Lions free agents and whether or not the Detroit Lions should resign these guys, should they place some tenders on these players, or should they just let them walk. Today, we're going to take a look at the Lions' remaining restricted free agents and go through each restricted free agent and make a decision on what the Lions should do with them. I thought it'd just be great to kind of clump it all into one, as the Lions have already re-signed 2 of these restricted free agents. Plus, I have some more notes from hearing from Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, where I was getting that information yesterday was off of like different parties, different sites. I wasn't able to find their like live combine stream, but I found it today. So I have a few more notes that I wanted to discuss in today's video. I thought we just kind of put it all together. And tomorrow the combine really kicks off, as they are now streaming it starting tomorrow. And I'm thinking what we're going to do for, because I think it's 4 days long, we're going to either do a stream every night or we'll do some sort of show to discuss some of our major takeaways from the day. I mean, the guys are already there now. They're doing their interview process with teams. I would love to get some behind the scenes on that would be awesome. Like, hey, I mean, Game Pass, come on now. We're already paying for your services. You could give us a little bit of behind the scenes. So I don't think we're going to stream the entire day, but we'll probably do one towards the end or afterwards, or we'll just do a pre-recorded show. We'll see how that goes. I know tomorrow is Thursday, so we have our last second dose show tomorrow. I'm sorry. Is this the longest intro we've ever had? Are we still going? Okay, you know what? Let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here, and it's good to be back to talk about Detroit Lions free agents. I know yesterday's video was kind of a long one, and we have a little bit more that I wanted to add on to that with some of my takeaways from Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Not a ton, just a couple things I want to add on. I thought we'd just clump it all together in today's video because there's one of these restricted free agents, probably the biggest restricted free agent that we have, which is our backup center, that I really wanted to talk about. I was going to clump him into a different video, but I was like, let's just do all these guys at once to just make it very simple. And we may do more of these videos on unrestricted free agents like Josh Reynolds, Tracy Walker. I know we did video on Charles Harris, but Josh Reynolds, Tracy Walker, I've been diving into their film recently, and I would like to discuss those guys as well. But we'll save that for another day. That way this video doesn't get super long, because I just know they will. So let's talk about the Detroit Lions restricted free agents and which of these restricted free agents the Detroit Lions should resign. Let's dive into it. On the right here, you can see the Detroit Lions restricted free agent. Basically, a restricted free agent is a player with 3 accrued seasons who's on an expired contract. So with a restricted free agent, the original team, which in this case would be the Lions, they do have a little bit more say on where the player can end up for the next season than, let's say, an unrestricted free agent who could just go sign anywhere. But they don't have as much say as, let's say, an exclusive rights free agent who, if you want to bring him back, you basically bring him back for 1 year on a super cheap deal and they can't go anywhere else. That's not exactly the case with a restricted free agent. You have a little bit more control because you can place a tender on a restricted free agent. Okay, so let's say I wanted to place a tender on my restricted free agent. You guys can see the different tender options: first round tender, second round tender, original pick, which for a guy like Evan Brown, undrafted, so you wouldn't actually get a pick, right of refusal. So let's say I wanted to place a second round tender on a restricted free agent cap number. That would be his cap number for the next season. Keep in mind, none of this is guaranteed, but that would be his cap number for the next season. It's already set. However, other teams can still negotiate with that player. So let's say I place a second round tender on him. That's his cap, but another team out there wants to negotiate. They kind of want that guy, so they offer him more money. Then it comes back to Lions. They can either match that offer, or if they decline to match that offer, that he can go to the team that offered him the better deal. The Lions then at that point would get that second round pick in return because they placed that tender on him. So for the team that's trying to acquire him, it can have teams kind of stay away a little bit because they're like, oh snap, I don't really want to give up a second round pick plus pay him, so some teams might just be like, you know what, we're just going to stay away from it. So it kind of locks him in a little bit more if you really wanted to keep a guy on your team, a restricted free agent. If you're really like, we want to keep this guy, you could definitely have a little bit more control of it, at least for the next season. But you can also bypass this. You can let him become an unrestricted free agent, but you can also bypass it and just extend him and be like, all right, here's a different contract, here's a contract extension. And we did that with Jason Cabinda and Josh Woods. Both their contracts are basically cheaper than any of these tender options because they probably weren't going to get paid that much anyway, so they took the extension from us instead. So you can just easily do that. And the Lions may do that with most of the guys on this right side if they try to bring him back. Start at the bottom and work our way up. Let's start with the offensive tackle, Will Holden. All right, now with Will Holden, he's one of these players that I don't really see the Lions placing a tender. I don't think it's worth it, because if you place a tender on him, you're paying that type of cap for next season. All right, so there is some money you're kind of getting locked into here. And for Will Holden, I don't think there's any need to do that. He was picked up this past season onto our practice squad from the Indianapolis Colts. He also spent time with the Saints in the past. He's a former 5th-round pick by the Arizona Cardinals. He was picked up by the Lions when Taylor Decker was dealing with this injury for depth. And we got to see him play a little bit last year. I think the first time we saw him was against Philadelphia, and he actually gave up a sack in that game when David Blough came into the game. So that wasn't a great start. But we also saw him a little bit more as the season kind of went on. Specifically, we saw him in that Green Bay Packers game because at one point there was no Penei Sewell or Taylor Decker in that game, and he was playing the left tackle position, which is what he's done in the past. 6'7", 330-pound offensive tackle that did play a total of 71 snaps last season. He was accounted for the 1 sack, which is the one in the Philadelphia game where David Blough was in at quarterback, and also 1 penalty. 31 of those snaps came against the Green Bay Packers. So in that game, there was a few things that were solid in that game. Run blocking didn't necessarily look bad, but I think a lot of things that were talked about him coming out of the draft is what you saw with the Detroit Lions. First off, in pass protection, it was rough. All right, now he didn't have a huge snap count amount. Only 71 snaps is a pretty small sample size to look at. I know PFF's grade was terrible for him, but it was a little rough, especially at the left tackle spot. He just doesn't have great movement, great speed to get on the edge with his kick slide, so it definitely caused him some issues. Guys at times would just run right past him. Run blocking wasn't bad. He does have some power to his game. He has a nice little base, and that's probably the best thing that I thought about his pass protection. Bend a little bit at the knees, plus he has a nice little anchor from a bull rush, and he can squat down a little bit, get a little low, and hold up as an anchor, but he just didn't have enough speed around the edge, and that actually led to the sack where he got thrown on the ground because he just couldn't get out there fast enough, and then when the edge rusher cut back inside, it was a mess at that point. I think the biggest concern here is that when he came in, and also keep in mind there was Matt Nelson in at right tackle, when he came in and they had both those tackles in, the Lions kind of went a little bit away from drop back passing, and on their first 3rd down and 10 with those two guys at tackle, the Lions went back to what we saw a lot earlier this season, and they ran a draw. It was like, oh snap, here we go. And it had me nervous in that Packers game. I was like, oh gosh, we're going to lose this game. We were winning at the time, and it was like, oh no, we're not going to be able to pass protect. Lions started to kind of go away from the straight drop back. They did a lot of them were getting the ball in their hands quickly, but straight drop backs were not as much of a thing when those two guys were in the game. Now, Penei Sewell, we saw Penei Sewell playing left tackle when Taylor Decker was out, and they had Matt Nelson at right tackle. Will Holden was not doing that. He just played at left tackle, but he also saw him a little bit as an extra offensive lineman for us. Okay, he played a little bit in that role. Still, they have Matt Nelson above him for that role, but even a couple times we saw 7 offensive lineman sets. Sometimes he'd be the 7th offensive lineman. He wasn't bad at getting to the second level, playing a little bit patient when getting to the second level, not running by guys, and he has a nice little anchor. He's young enough where I think he could still improve coming out of the 2017 draft as a 5th-round pick. However, I definitely don't think this is someone that you're going to place a tender on. I don't think you need to bring him back. If the Lions were going to do this, it would be about as cheap as they could make the deal, bring him back for summer workouts, and give him an opportunity to compete. That's all I could see here, but aside from that, I don't see much more from that. When you also see where he kind of was on the totem pole of offensive tackles, yeah, he was maybe a little bit ahead of a guy like Dan Skipper, who missed a lot of time because of his injury. It didn't seem like the Lions were super confident when he was on the field either to continue to run their same offense. I think the Lions are going to look to improve that position this offseason, and Will Holden doesn't necessarily need to be a part of that, but he could. He could be someone that you have, and you could have him compete and work on the practice squad and things like that next season as well. Bring him through summer workouts, but don't expect the Lions to place a tender on this guy. I predict the Lions don't bring him back. He becomes an unrestricted free agent, and he goes and signs elsewhere. But who knows? Maybe he could end up back on our practice squad. So next up, we have a safety who has kind of a similar build to a guy like Juju Hughes. That is CJ Moore at 5'11", 192 pounds. He's only 26 years old. And actually, watching some of the games that CJ Moore did play in last season, I was kind of impressed. He looked pretty comfortable, and he was able to play a lot of different roles for us. He looked actually pretty good out there, and he actually ended up making a big play at the end of the season, which was the interception against the Green Bay Packers off of the tip when he was in as like a sub-down linebacker. It set us up to take the field goal, which put us up by 7 points. So he had an interception in that game as well, which was nice, and he only played 158 snaps last season. He did play over 300 snaps on special teams. Now, some of this could depend on what Juju Hughes is. Lions may look to go with that guy instead, but CJ Moore is a guy that I initially, as soon as I looked at him, like, oh yeah, they're probably not going to bring him back. However, after watching him, I could see the Lions looking to bring him back. First off, Will Harris is under contract next season, and so is Brady Breeze. That's all you have at safety. Tracy Walker, we know he's an unrestricted free agent. I expect him to come back. We know Lions will address it and probably add at least one more player in free agency. They definitely could use it at least for depth. But what I liked, first thing that stuck out is he played a lot of different spots for us. We saw him in the last game of the season against Green Bay come in as kind of a sub linebacker on some of those pass touchdowns, especially at the end of games. Denver game where he played 26 snaps. We saw him play a lot of the deep safety roles with a lot of Dean Marlowe playing in the box, playing a lot of the man coverage roles. He played kind of the deep safety role. And then we also saw him in the Arizona game play every single snap defensively in that Arizona game. Again, a lot of his reps here came more as like a deep free safety in that game, so he didn't have a lot of production. However, he looked pretty comfortable. Now, there are, I think, some issues, and it does show up with size, especially when they put him in those man responsibilities, and I think it's probably some of the reason why the Lions kept him out of it a little bit, because when they put him in man coverage, he lacks some size, and you can get some matchups, especially if you put him on a guy like a tight end. But he absolutely has the speed. He ran like a 4.43 coming out of college. He definitely has some of the straight line speed. He's pretty explosive on stop and start. I think some of that helps him because he is a little bit lower to the ground. He lacks a little bit of that length for ball skills, making plays at the catch point. And I think he could definitely improve when playing that single high deep safety role and some of flipping his hips. He's not having to turn completely around. He definitely looked pretty smooth. And the Lions gave him a lot of different roles this past year. We've seen him blitz a few times. He definitely has that closing speed. He was accounted for having 12 targets against him, allowing 8 completions, and like I said, the interception. So because of the very small of sample size there, the interception means he allowed a sub 40 pass rating, which is fantastic, of course. He is pretty good at being aware of where routes are, and also in man coverage aside from some of the length. He looked pretty good. His change of direction was solid. He definitely has that nice top end speed. I like him. His BFF grade is 49.7 against the run, 55.9 as a pass rusher, 62.3 in coverage. Size definitely has some limitations here, no question about that. However, you had guys like Jalen Elliott last season, more snaps then. Also, Jalen Elliott's another free agent. He's an exclusive rights free agent. Dean Marlowe, if the Lions aren't going to bring a guy like Dean Marlowe back, I could see them actually bringing back a guy like CJ Moore, and I would actually be cool with it after watching last year's film of some of the games that he played in. I mean, I really didn't know how much he played last year. Watching some of those games, though, he looked comfortable. He was flying around. The Lions put him in a lot of different positions. I wouldn't be mad at bringing back CJ Moore for another season again, but it would be a super cheap deal, not placing a tender on the guy, bring him back throughout the summer, give him a chance to compete, and compete for a depth role. There's no guarantee that he would make the team, not at all, because the Lions are going to bring some additions in this offseason. But I wouldn't be mad at bringing a guy like CJ Moore back. Projection, I'm going to predict, you know what? I'm going to predict the Lions re-sign CJ Moore. Juju Hughes is under contract for next season. It could give them a reason not to bring him back. Also, kind of the same thing with Brady Breeze here if they keep him around. Instead, we have quarterback David Blough. David Blough has been here for a few seasons with the Lions. Last year, we just didn't see him play that much. We did see him a very, very little bit. He played one series. He took off and scrambled, picked up 6 yards, almost fumbled, then came back the next play and did fumble, and then we ran a draw. It was the very end of that Philadelphia game, which just got out of hand. It was really bad. Our pass protection was just really not good, and I think David Blough felt that as soon as he came into the game. It was just a bad situation, really, in that kind of stretch of this last season for anybody that was trying to play that position. But David Blough is a guy that I had to go back, watch his preseason games, see how he played in those games. I'll just say this right now, projection-wise, I don't think he's going to be brought back. Here's how I'm kind of looking at it. The Lions bring back Tim Boyle. I don't see them bringing back a guy like David Blough, because then I see it being a different addition at quarterback. You know, maybe that's a UDFA, maybe it's a draft pick, someone else to compete for that spot. However, if they don't bring back Tim Boyle, maybe David Blough is possible to bring back. I don't think the Lions will, because we saw it last season, right? He was there all year against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Goff was dealing with an injury. They rolled with Jared Goff. Second thing, they didn't really move guys around the preseason, but he did have a good preseason. All right. It would have been nice to see him get to play with the second team, because he played with the third team, and they did well there. I mean, he did well with the third team, especially against the Steelers, and the Bills kind of brought us back into those games. It was not perfect by any means. All right, there's definitely some issues there. Some of his passes are just straight up inaccurate. They're just not accurate at all. Some of his passes come out funny. They hit the ground. They sail way too high. Obviously, he's a little bit on the shorter side, but I thought he played very confident watching those preseason games back. We know what his mobility can do when he can keep plays alive. House timing on reads didn't always seem very perfect. However, we didn't get the all 22 of preseason games. You just get the broadcast view, which doesn't make it easy to tell what he's actually seeing. I don't think we helped Tim Boyle out a ton with that second unit, but for the third unit, thirds against thirds, I actually thought David Blough did a pretty good job. On the preseason, he completed 68% of his passes, 30 of 44. He had a touchdown, he had a pick, which equaled out to an 88.8 QBR. It was not perfect, but he did lay some good passes. Definitely doesn't have like any type of rocket on his arm. Okay, there's not a lot of velocity coming off those passes, but he did lay some nice balls, laid some catchable passes for us, and he made some things happen, extending plays. I just thought he looked really confident in this year's preseason. To have him back as the third quarterback, to give him another chance to compete. I wouldn't have an issue with it. Again, not placing a tender on this guy, it just wouldn't make sense. I wouldn't have actually an issue with bringing him back to compete as a third quarterback, for next season. That doesn't mean he'll make the team. I just don't believe necessarily that the Lions are going to bring him back. Now, Evan Brown is coming off a really nice season, especially for a backup center. I mean, he's coming off a great season. And the issue with Evan Brown is that, first off, the Lions actually may have to use a tender here if they're going to want to try to keep around Evan Brown. We'll talk about that in a second. But Evan Brown played well enough. The issue is here because of how young he is. An undrafted free agent in 2018 out of SMU. The guy who played guard back in college to start off. He played 3 games in his first season at guard. Then 12 games started in his second season at guard. Then in his junior year, he became a full-time center at SMU. An undrafted player that spent time with a couple of other teams until landing with the Lions 2020, then earning a futures contract, being brought back in 2021, competing with a guy like Drake Jackson, who didn't end up making the team at UDFA out of Kentucky. Other guys could have competed at that spot as well. I don't necessarily know if they feel like Logan Stenberg can play this role. I don't know. Maybe he competed for that position. Tommy Kramer, can he play this role? Not sure. Maybe he can. I don't know. We saw Jonah Jackson play a little bit of center. But when Evan Brown was given his opportunity, which was for a lot of the season because Frank Ragnow missed a lot of time, my goodness, he was really darn solid. I gotta be honest, if I was another team and let's say our team was like, man, we don't have a center, I would be pushing for going and signing a guy like Evan Brown. I'd probably be pushing for that. That's not to say I'd break bank on him, but I'd be pushing for my team to go try to sign a guy like Evan Brown away from the Lions, knowing that he's their backup. Lions currently have the highest paid center in the National Football League in Frank Ragnow, $13.5 million per year on average. He's coming off getting his contract extension. So if I was another team, I'd be like, hey, let's go get this guy, Evan Brown. Let's get him away from the Lions because they're just not going to overpay because he only really can be their backup. Unless, of course, maybe he tries to push for the guard position. With that, Tommy Kramer, he's an exclusive right free agent. I think you just bring him back. He improves a lot during the season, so I'd bring that guy back. You do have Logan Stenberg still under contract. He can come back and again compete for the backup guard position. You could add more to that. But the big reason there, people are saying, well, maybe Lions move on from Big V, save some cap. There would be some dead cap to that. Move on from Big V, cut the guy, and just try to place him at the guard position, let him compete for that role. And while that's possible because he has done it in the past, I don't necessarily know if I believe that that's his best role, and I don't know how much success he would have there. At the center position, he did 2 things I think really well. First off, he was a really good communicator for the Lions. He did a fantastic job keeping his head on a swivel, very aware of everything that was going on. Really nice job snapping, especially out of the shotgun. I know it's a little thing, but it definitely stuck out. The guy looked very confident at the center position, and he kind of eased it for us where you didn't really feel the loss of Frank Ragnow, but you definitely felt the loss when Ryan McCollum had to step in for us at center. You felt that. You didn't necessarily feel it with Evan Brown. Evan Brown was good at that, and he was also very good in pass protection. One of the best pass protectors by really any metric or stat that you look at last season as a center. In terms of efficiency last season, he was ranked 6th in the National Football League at 98.9% for the center position. He was also ranked 5th in true pass sets at the center position. He was accounted for only allowing 8 pressures, 3 quarterback hits, and 1 sack over 455 pass blocking snaps. According to ESPN, he was 9th in pass block win rate. The guy was really good as a pass protector. And you go back to when he played at SMU, they were a lot of quick pace, a lot of quick action offensively, a lot of quick passes, also a ton of screens, which I think helped him for us working towards second level in those draw plays because he has a background of just trying to get to the second level, be patient. Did a lot of work there as well. Where I think Evan Brown lacks a little bit is some of his movement, his push in the run game. That's where I think Evan Brown lacks some, and we saw it. His run grades didn't come back great. You saw it on film too. He wasn't really moving guys as a center. He was kind of just there, but he wasn't really moving guys. I don't necessarily think he's best suited for the transition to the guard position, but he's definitely built to play the center spot for sure. So I would like to keep him if I brought him around as my backup center because I think it's very valuable to have a backup center that you can rely upon. He may be able to plug into guard if you need it. This is as high as really your stock can get. I mean, you're looking at a guy that finally got his opportunity, not going to come in and be a starter at center. He's not going to ever take Frank Ragnow's spot. I mean, with how much he's getting paid, let's be real. So this is about as high as it can get. And he played a good season. Teams that need a center should be interested, which would force the Lions, if they wanted to bring him back, you got to believe they're probably going into some of their tender options. Now, there also, again, is the option to just bypass that and try to re-sign him. But I got to believe if I'm Evan Brown, I'm looking at this thinking, hey, I just did that last season. I was real solid. This is as high as my stock has been. Could be the highest it's going to get. This is my opportunity to go get a payday and have a chance to compete for a starting center position somewhere else that needs it. The Lions don't need it. If I was Evan Brown, that's how I'd look at it. Unless they told me, hey, we're going to try to move you a guard, then I'd compete for guard because that could be an option. However, if it's center, I look at that as I want to get paid. Lions could bring him back on a deal similar to a guy like Kyle Shatley. I think that's how you say his name, from Jacksonville. He just got a 2-year, up to $6.8 million deal as their backup center. He's had to play over 600 snaps these last 2 years, but he has some guard versatility as well. Thing is, he's a little bit older. He's 31 years old. The Lions could extend him to that kind of deal. I'd be perfectly open to it. I think you need depth, especially with COVID. You can't control that. It's not even an injury thing. You just, oh, he's got COVID, he's down. Have a backup center is really nice. We had to go through 3 centers last year. That's your strength. If I don't have to take away from that, I'm not going to. If I can keep building on that and then adding my players back, why would I lose guys if that's my strength as a team, if that's what I'm really playing through? I'm going to add to that as much as I possibly can. So if I could get him on that kind of extension, I'd absolutely do it. I just don't know if he would accept something like that. That's the issue. So then that goes to the tender options. I think the most likely tender option that would keep him around would be a second round tender. $3.9 million. The issue is it's only next season, but it's $3.9 million, which is kind of expensive. We're talking about almost $4 million for a guy to play the backup center position. It is kind of expensive. Plus, you only have him under contract then for 1 season. Maybe through that time, you could try to work on an extension for him to try to bring him back. The thing is, there's just a cap to how much he's going to get paid here. I would think second round tender is as high as the Lions would go, because at very least, you're getting a second round pick in return if someone wants to pay him more than that. So maybe the Lions could put a second round tender. Hey, look, if someone wants to pay more, do it, but you're going to have to give us a second round pick too. Original pick, he wasn't a pick, so they wouldn't get anything. So let's say they paid something like that, the $2.4, $2.5 million for 1 year. They would have an opportunity to match that. Maybe they do something like that, but they wouldn't be getting a return. And like Lions probably won't likely get a comp pick out of this unless he signs something that is just like $9 million a year, which I wouldn't expect if he did, and the Lions don't replace that, but they probably will because they're probably going to spend more money in free agency, according to hearing what Brad Holmes had to say. So I think it's a tough one for him. I'd love to bring him back. I think second round tenders is how the Lions go for this. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Really don't want to lose him. I don't want to lose pieces to this. Maybe he can play a guard if you need him to. If he's shown some of that versatility, which we haven't seen, then maybe he could do it. I know he's done it past. I just think his best fit is backup center. The benefit of an extension, of course, is that you could backload a little bit. You can set up a contract a certain way where maybe you're not owing $4 million for next season. Of course, if you do it on this tender, yeah, let's say I put a second round tender on him and someone wants to overpay and I end up getting a second round pick out of it. That works perfectly. Putting a second round tender on a guy could just keep teams away. We're like, yeah, we're not going to give up a second round pick. So then it's $3.9 million. And it's not a ton, but it's just the fact that that would be on 2022 is what makes it kind of expensive. Think about it like this, right? I think our most expensive signing outside of re-signing Romeo Okwara last season was the addition of Tyrell Williams. His yearly cash for 2021 was $4 million. All right, so it is kind of expensive, especially when you're looking at the Lions cap space now, $20 million in cap space, somewhere in that area. $4 million of that going to a backup center. It's a lot. I think the Lions' best bet here would be trying to extend him 2-3 years, maybe backload a little bit, maybe it's about $3 million a season, something like that. Fortunately for the Lions, I'm going to predict that Evan Brown probably signs elsewhere to a pretty big deal to have a chance to start at center for some team. But if those teams overlook that and they don't pay attention to Evan Brown, his contract stays cheap because he's just looked at as a backup, then hey, perfect for us, we can bring him back. I'm viewing this as a backup center, but maybe the Lions have visions of that he could be the guard and something like that. If that's the case, then that changes things up completely. The Lions will probably be willing to spend more money here and probably give him a bigger extension than I'm talking. But I would think, viewing him as a backup center, that I would at least place one of the cheaper tenders on him to have an opportunity to at least potentially match an offer that someone else gives him. Of course, at that point, if it was not a second or first round tender, you're not getting a pick in return because he wasn't a draft pick. But I would at least do that. At the same time, the price is not super expensive, so if he does stay with the roster, it's not like $4 million for next season or like the first round, which is $5.5 million. It's only in about $2.5 million ballpark, which I think would be fine for the Lions. I would at least place that on him if I can't get an extension done. I can also see from Evan Brown's point of view, he's going to be looking for a payday. Hearing Brad Holmes speak at the Combine, he did talk a little bit about having the ability now, because of where they're at financially, as he's called it before, the player acquisition phase, to go sign more deals that aren't necessarily all one-year deals. Not saying he won't do that, but aren't all one-year deals. Again, I think this priority will continue to be re-signing players, but he may go out and sign more multi-year deals. When we went through the video, I talked about I can see the Lions doing a couple of these, like they did with LA with the Robert Woods deal, with the other 3-year deal for Andrew Whitworth. I can see them doing a couple of these to plug some holes. He said they still want to continue to try to build through the draft, but that is one thing that he brought up, is the universe is a little bit more open to them now to being able to go acquire players. Also, to add on what Dan Campbell said yesterday, being able to hear the full thing, he did say that it was somewhat, the 4 down lineman thing was kind of what they did a little bit in the second half half of the last season. The main thing here is that they want to get downhill. They want to have their guys playing downhill, not laterally. Campbell was describing was kind of a one-gapping defensive approach. So we hit on it yesterday when we discussed what it could look like for next season. I know we're super far early out. It's interesting because Dom Capers, who's working with the Lions last season, he's coming from that heavy two-gap background, but he's seen everything defensively. But in a one-gap defense where everybody's responsible for one gap, so you're getting downhill, and that's what Campbell said, is he want guys attacking downhill first, not laterally. And usually in a two-gap defense, you're a little bit more read, find the ball, then react to it, and you could be taking on more offensive linemen at the second level. But one gap, you're crashing, you're shooting, you're working downhill, and that's what he wants. And the Lions have the builds for it. Like when you look up how the Lions are built and you compare it to that kind of defense and how our players fit into it, the Lions have guys that are built to fit in that kind of defense, to be downhill, be aggressive, be attacking. And it kind of seemed like it was in Aaron Glenn's nature to just be aggressive. Plus, we hear Dan Campbell all the time, we're going to let it loose. Like, okay, yeah, they're going to be bringing the pressure next season. So makes a ton of sense that he's saying this. It kind of goes on what we hit on yesterday, that this is how the Lions are going to be playing. And I think it fits strengths really well to shoot gaps, work downhill. I really think it does. Levi, Aleem, I think these guys will play really well in that defense. And it should also allow for more production, but it's going to be downhill. That kind of defense is built for guys that are explosive, first step, explode to the backfield. And you think about what Dan Campbell was saying at this combine, and he was like, well, last year we had this bucket of different players, and a lot of these guys were carried over from last season. Maybe this is part of the reason why the Lions are kind of, just so about the whole Trey Flowers situation, not really going into. And it's part of the reason Lions can move on from a guy like Trey Flowers, who was from a different defensive system. This is about getting downhill, getting into the backfield. And with that, you want those explosive first step kind of guys defensively. It's exciting because it is mixing it up a little bit from what we were in the past. There is no Damon Harrison coming into this kind of defense, right? It's about getting into the backfield and exploding to the backfield. So those type of athletes that the Lions are looking for, expect that to continue to be added to this type of defense. And I think it's part of the reason, again, why Trey Flowers may be on his way out, because Trey Flowers wasn't necessarily from that type of style. But now that it's a year into it, they have a little more flexibility on guys they can keep, what they know they have, who they want to keep, and who fits what. They can do a little bit more of that. And we did see a little bit more in the second half of the season. Todd Walsh was talking about the Lions doing this more in the second half of the season. Also, Dan Campbell, he talked a lot about the quarterback position. I don't know what the question was asked. I wish you could mic up the guys that are asking questions, because I don't know what they're saying. But I know that he talked a lot about the quarterback position, and he basically said, look, I'm going to get a guy that you really like. And for him, the two things is there. He has to be able to grow. He has to be able to develop. It has to be more internal before the external things. He's not as focused on, can they be mobile? Being able to understand, develop, grow the offense. It's more the internal. It's more up here versus looking for a guy that can, be mobile. They're looking for that. I definitely think the door is still open for the Lions to draft a quarterback this offseason. And the more I hear Dan Campbell, it sounds like he's going to do it. Maybe he's fooling me, but it sounds like he's going to draft a quarterback at some point in this draft. It does to function and run the offense, take command of the huddle before necessarily what their traits are, like mobility and things like that. That stuff's great, but it's more about that first. So yeah, definitely left the door open for drafting a quarterback. I mean, he's not going to give anything away. Everything can be smoke screened as well, but I think what he's saying makes a lot of sense. So I don't think it's fake in terms of that's the kind of quarterback that you look for. And also he ended up with saying that he loves Trey Flowers and it's something that they'll be in contact with. Brad Holmes just said they'll be in contact, with Trey Flowers, and their agents. They do like Trey Flowers, the approach that he brings, but that's something that they'll just handle on a later date, what they're going to end up doing with Trey Flowers. Again, I think they're going to be out on Trey Flowers this season. I think they'll end up probably just cutting him. Maybe they can find a trade with him. They do like Trey Flowers. We all like Trey Flowers. I mean, he's a hard player. He's a tough player. We all like that. Good run defender. He's a good player when he's healthy. He just hasn't been. He's getting paid a lot of money. That's the issue with Trey Flowers, but we've hit on that. Let me know down in the comments below what you would do with these restricted free agents. We'll keep up to date with the combine for the next couple of days as we go through it. Look forward to late streams or late videos on that, or maybe next day videos of the last day where we discuss what we saw from the combine. Look out for live streams. Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.